I'm all for trying to keep the teams as informed as possible at all times of the context of the work that they're doing. Because I think if you don't have the context for the work that you're doing, it's very hard to be motivated. Having diversity across all the spectrum in the room means you get the broadest possible worldview, inputting to your strategy or problem solving, and that's inevitably going to give you great results. Everything that you learn that's really important, you learn when you fail. There are very few things that you learn from the things that are just successful or that come easily. As soon as someone says, that can't be done, that's like an invitation. It's like, right, let's have a look at what can't be done. That sounds like something that's quite interesting. No great things are achieved by being realistic.
This is CIO of TV. My name is Hendrik Deckers. I'm here today with Charlotte Light, CIO of Channel 4.
Good morning.
Good morning, Charlotte. Charlotte has a bachelor degree in environmental science and archaeology and a master in applied marine science. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And for the first 10 years of her career, she was a consultant at IBM, at Bupa, and then she became IT director for more than 4 years at Specsavers. And now she's the CIO at Channel 4 for almost 4 years. And of course, we all know Channel 4 as the British publicly owned, commercially funded service broadcaster that works in television, film and digital media.
Yep, that's right.
So I'm very pleased to be here with you, Charlotte, today. And the first thing I would like to talk about is the program that you did, the transformation program of your digital TV platform. Can we talk about that?
Yes, so I arrived at Channel 4, as you say, 4 years ago. And TV is a new industry for me, so there was quite a lot of new technology and new business ideas to get my head around. But one of the things that's clearly critical as a media company at the moment is our digital platform. So that's all four, especially with some of the larger digital companies moving into the content and digital content space. And we already had a 14-year-old platform or set of platforms on our .com, iOS, Android and big screen device applications. But the delivery model was had evolved over time. And as part of our digital future, we were really focused on how can we grow and scale the technical delivery of the platform in order to support our business growth and our strategic objectives around digital. And so one of the things I looked at was, what's the supplier mix? What's the internal team construct? What's the methodology that we're using? And we got to an interesting point where the chief executive at the time asked if we were to get additional funding, how quickly and how readily could we spend it? And it was clear to me that our model would not scale.
Okay.
So I took a look at that in terms of figuring out what we needed to do and went to market to find an additional, potentially a new supplier model where we could consolidate and use suppliers to provide us with some guidance about our methodology and deliver us some best practice. Potentially use nearshore model for the economies of scale that would offer us. And so we went through that process over 18 months of consolidation, new supplier selection, process transformation. Yeah. And over the last 18 months, that's then manifested in the results that we were looking for. So we've seen a 27% increase in productivity. We've seen a 29% reduction in cost per feature point and a 6% reduction in day rate costs, which has been great, but the cost aspect is important, but we're also, of course, looking for improved productivity and the ability to scale. And at one point last year, when we were looking at delivering an SVOD platform, a new iOS app, did some work with Google Home, we scaled to 60% of our base team size, and now we've scaled back down a little bit while we're addressing some other requirements. So both in terms of managing the cost, increasing velocity and having the scalability, that's been a successful transformation of our mode of delivery.
Because I can imagine that's quite a challenge. I mean, you have to support all these different platforms that all have the different ways of working. And I mean, Channel 4 is a big company, but it's not a super big company compared to the other content providers and broadcasters and so on. So you have to do a lot with typically a smaller budget, I can imagine, than the bigger players. So you had to be very creative in coming to a good solution.
Yeah, I mean, we need to get more bang for our buck, essentially. Yeah. And the difficulty is trying to balance getting a good, cost-effective relationship with a supplier while having a supplier with enough breadth of experience and scale to be able to support us in what we're trying to achieve.
And who did you go? Who are you working with?
We're working with Accenture Digital primarily for our IOS and our .com and our central services work. And then we work with two specialist suppliers, so Excedo and Novoda, Excedo on big screen devices and Novoda for Android. We've had pre-existing relationships with them for some time. We also use Pixel for some of our service work and our CI/CD work. So there's a blend of suppliers, but I think bringing in Accenture Digital was a conscious decision because of their expertise. They've worked with a lot of different TV companies on their on-demand platforms and their digital applications. And they've helped us not only with the delivery, but also transforming our methodology so that we're moving towards fully scaled Agile in terms of our delivery model. We do PI planning now on a quarterly basis, which gives us a better view ahead. And that's great for my internal team because it provides an upskilling and allows us to sort of develop our own capabilities so that we have a strong in-house team and then we're complemented with the suppliers that we're working with.
So with the suppliers, it allows you to basically scale quickly without needing to hire and also get the expertise in-house of the different platforms that need to be developed.
Yeah, it's a balance that you need to strike between having the strength of knowledge and understanding of your platform and what features you want to focus on and what your priorities are with the scale in the build and test. But I think more than that, we look to our suppliers to provide us with strategic design guidance and help challenge us in terms of our thinking. You want a relationship with a supplier that's active, not passive, in any aspect of your technology estate. And I think suppliers, I kind of look more to suppliers now to step up a little bit in terms of not just telling me what I need to be doing, because they'll often come and say, this is what you need to be doing. Well, I know that. I need to find a way to do that while I'm running the operation. So the supplier not only needs to sort of have the strategic guidance and be able to execute, but also help you through
the how,
doing it while you're running. And I think increasingly, not just in the digital space, but across all of our technology areas, trying to introduce the scale of change whilst running what is a sort of big and complex technology estate. That's one of the things that's quite difficult.
Okay. So you basically also, you did a serious transformation of your supplier and how the way that you manage them. How do you work with your suppliers differently now than before?
I think it's more of we have higher expectations, I would say, and we have a tighter SLA construct. So we have a quarterly review where we look at the SLAs and we look at performance in a more active way. I think often across my whole career, I've had relationships with suppliers where you set up the SLAs, you put the framework in place, and then once you get into run mode, it all seems to fall a little by the wayside or the reviews become a little bit informal. If we've kind of gone the other way here, so we're formalizing the reviews on a monthly basis, and now not only with Accenture as a core supplier, but with our other suppliers, we have reviews on a monthly basis to look at what's working, what's not working, and then have that be a two-way dialogue. I think there used to be more of a model in technology where the client would ask the supplier and the supplier would provide, and it was a very kind of two-dimensional relationship. There's so much to do now when you're delivering technology change that you need a far less passive relationship.
And is that because you're using much more agile methods and so on? Is the agile method, does it need a different supplier model as well, or a supplier relationship?
I think it requires a lot more interaction on a far more frequent basis. You're not handing something over
and come back in 6 months,
and then they come back. You're having a dialogue on a weekly basis. But I think you're also looking for, you want to be an account your suppliers want to work on. You want their staff to want to work with you. So you need to provide interesting work in an environment that is somewhere people want to work. And that way, their best staff will want to come and work with you and work for you, and you'll get loyalty from supplier staff when they're working on your account. And I think that it's a careful line to manage to make sure you retain the degrees of separation that you need, that it's a formal commercial relationship while creating the links and the on-the-ground working experience that means people feel fully engaged and not like they're two separate teams and not like there's that blame game happening, which can happen.
But in a media company, I can imagine, I mean, it's a fun environment, no? A lot of things are changing and so on, so.
It is fun, and it's a great company, it has a great ethos, and obviously it's creative. From a tech perspective, that can be a little bit challenging because you know, a lot of technology is about pinning stuff down and putting boundaries and parameters and controls in place. And so that can often not sit comfortably within a really creative environment. So from a technical delivery perspective, that can cause frustrations for suppliers or for staff when they're trying to nail something down and get it done. But in the main, the environment means there's really interesting work to do, and the culture sort of supports getting that done.
Yeah. And so how do you make sure you have enough diversity in your IT team?
Well, I mean, I work with the Tech Talent Charter and Tech She Can. The main, if I look at the statistics in my team, you know, the main issue that I have, as you know, many companies have, is on gender diversity. There are fewer women than there are men, and so it's really working with third parties who are focused on shifting the dial there that is important.
And so what's the percentage of female IT people that you have in?
I think the latest stats were at 27%.
That's not bad.
Which is good.
Yeah. You have a target that you want to get?
Which is good against the market. I mean, the company target is close to sort of 50-50,
okay.
You know, across the company. For me, it's about creating the environment where there's the opportunity, where there's a sort of where you have an inclusive feel about the office, where the roles that are available are marketed and put out there in a way which have the broadest possible appeal. So we've done work like other companies have done around job descriptions and making sure that they don't close down applications from women, which is often a challenge. We've also done workshops internally looking at unconscious bias, which is often an issue in creating a culture that doesn't necessarily feel inclusive for women. So we've done some work around that. And we have an internal working group who look at, on an annual basis, what are the things that we can do. And just simple things like there's a Women of Silicon Roundabout. It's a huge event in London every year. And every year now, a number of women from the department go to the conference. And it's a very empowering conference. It's both very technical at one end, but also about, you know, how to build confidence and plan your career at the other end of the spectrum. And one of my team members who went last year went this year as a speaker, was so motivated by it that this year she went as a speaker. So I think it's about creating the opportunities for your staff and making sure you're looking at the environment and understanding what the constraints are and balancing those two things.
I can imagine that you've worked in environments where there were less women, less than. Do you see a difference in culture and the way of work? What's the main difference if there's like 5 or 10% women, or if there's 25% in IT?
I think it's obviously a very individual thing. Certainly when I was younger in my career, there were less women, and I was less experienced. I think confidence is a big issue for women. So whether or not it's the environment or it's a facet of the environment not being as open for women because they potentially lack the confidence to speak as freely or speak out or put themselves out there. I can definitely identify with that. There were times when I was earlier in my career where I'd be thinking something and I'd be thinking, this is an important thing, I should probably say this, and then I wouldn't say it, and then someone else would say it, it'd be like, I should have said it, right? It was a smart thing to say, but I sat on it because I wasn't sure, and I'm in a room full of people who I don't necessarily feel as engaged with. I also don't like talking about football. we've sat through
That's
many,
a problem.
the first 10 to 15 minutes of a meeting. It's all about football, or fantasy football, even worse. Like, it's not even real football, it's fantasy football. I mean, my husband's South African, he's into rugby. So now I know enough about rugby, I can hold my own and actually be quite interested.
So that would be your tip for women IT leaders. Make sure you know enough about rugby or football.
Well, I don't think that's the answer, right? I think you have to call it out. So I'll quite happily now say, really, football again for the next 10 minutes? Or can we just sort of move on because I'm busy?
Yeah. But do you see, what's the difference for the company? Do you see different results if there's 25% women compared to 5-10%? Or?
Well, it's not just about women, right?
No.
I think in any environment or any meeting where you have a mixture. And I suppose, to use an example, in my team now, I have a team of direct reports. There are 7 of us. Mixture of different gender, different race, different types of people. So some extroverts, some introverts, a whole variety of people. And it's a great dynamic. And because you don't have groupthink. You don't have everyone being the same. And with that, you get different ideas. And sometimes I'll feel quite challenged. So one of my guys will say, I think, oh, that's not what I think, or that's not how I think. Yeah. But that's good, right? That's what forces you to start thinking about things in a less polarized way. Yeah. And if you have a room full of people, or where there's a majority of people who are the same type, I think you get that groupthink, and you start to get those polarized views, and you start to believe your own worldview. Yeah. So I think having that diversity across all the spectrum in the room means you get the broadest possible worldview, inputting to your strategy or problem solving, and that's inevitably going to give you great results. Yeah. Right? It's going to give you a better result than a really homogenized, polarized view.
And I can imagine that the demands from, let's say, the business sides of the company are huge on you. So how do you manage that? How do you work with, how you organize the supply and demand in IT here? So
when I arrived, we had a program of work, which is essentially the sort of book of work every year, comes out of the budget, and we would then try and deliver everything on the list. And I think there was a degree of control around it, but not sufficient that we could manage it in a really tight way around budget, resources, concurrency, and all of those sort of, like when we were talking earlier about, it's quite a creative company, those sorts of controls that perhaps limit some of that creativity once you're into this delivery mode. Some of those were missing. So I've introduced a PMO. So we have an annual planning cycle. We have a change process where, at least if new work comes in, we manage that. And there's a constant dialogue with stakeholders and different business teams about their priorities. Yep. And it's difficult now, and I suspect it's not just a Channel 4 problem, it's an any company problem, that the volume of demand far outweighs the technology department's ability to execute. Yep. But equally, trying to prioritize those demands when all of them seem urgent, also quite difficult. Yep. So we look at what's legal and compliance, where are the regulatory things that we have to do, they're on the list. What have we got that's in flight and is going to run over year to year? It's on the list. And then it becomes, how are different projects necessarily aligned to what the company is trying to achieve strategically, which ones are going to generate the most revenue, which ones are going to improve efficiency by the highest margin, and then we try and sort of lay those out through the year in a way that doesn't put too much concurrency on the teams. So I have teams looking after data, content and scheduling systems, ad sales systems, the all 4 products, corporate systems. I want to make sure I haven't forgotten anyone, because that would be a disaster. And each of those teams have a certain amount of capacity, and some of the projects require interdependencies between those teams, so they have to be scheduled in that sort of way. And it's the PMO that sort of builds that roadmap and tries to run that.
And that's a new function.
It is a new function, and you know, I was a quality manager when I was at Bupa, and we had fairly rigorous and robust sort of processes and controls, but this was like 10 years ago when pace was slower.
Yeah.
You had time to implement, run a project, and then sweat an asset. That cycle times were up to a decade potentially.
Yeah.
And now your cycle time is you need to select, implement, and derive value in maybe 3 to 4 years if you're lucky. And so bringing all of those processes and controls that we used to have as a technology PMO and just dropping them into this environment would have been very limiting, quite disruptive, and extremely painful. So the approach that we've taken is to look at where are the biggest issues. So we had a big issue where we'd have our plan and then more requests would just come in through the year.
Yeah.
And we would try and absorb them, which was meaning our projects would run long, our people were burning out, really high concurrency and a volume problem. Okay. So we just started to look at every change that comes in needs to go through some kind of board where we'll sit and look at, is it incremental or is it substitutional? So if it's substitutional, what are we going to take out of the plan for that team to allow this work to slot in? If it's incremental, we're going to go back and ask for more money and potentially engage a third party to provide some additional capacity. And so that was just one thin slice. And then a next slice was to put in an ARB, an architectural review board, to review designs. So we had an issue where we might choose something and then the architects would derive a design, and then my program teams would deliver something that was an interpretation of the design. And that obviously causes problems because you don't get to a sort of centralized enterprise construct. So now we have an ARB where a design is signed off by the architects, and then that is the design that the delivery teams need to implement. So it's thin slices of control. We're currently focused on improving project and program reporting. A lot of the noise, I think, for the teams comes from requests for information. We haven't had standardized reporting historically outside of each business area. So now we're looking at what report would answer the majority of the questions in terms of how long, when's the next milestone, how much budget, those sorts of things. So we're doing work on that, and we typically do work that can be kind of boxed in a quarter.
And how do you work together with business? Because in Agile, do you have business people in the teams, or how much do you meld IT and business together, or how much is it still separate, really separate? Is it more a supplier inside the company? How is that evolving? No,
I mean, I think it's not as separate as some places where I've been, where technology is over here and the business is over there, and never the twain shall meet. I wouldn't say it's fully integrated either, and it also varies by area. So if I look at ad sales, we've got a number of people who operate in the business who are very close to working with technology. We have a bespoke system that we provide for them, so by the very nature that has to be a close relationship, but they also work with third-party suppliers like Freewheel, who provide technical services, have a good understanding of technology and Agile, and so that working is very close together. We then have some where there's a degree of it being more service provision. So in the data team, we have a data team who look after our big data platform and the pipelines that feed our customer insight. Now they work really closely together, but the data scientists and the customer insight team do their work, and the data team manage and provide and maintain the pipelines. And there's more dialogue when there's change, but in run mode, they're probably not working so closely together. So.
And how do you see that evolving? Because, I mean, it used to be IT and the seller and business up there, and they would speak every 3 months or so, and now we're working already more together. Do you see that it's going to fuse together more and more, or what's your view on?
It's a tricky one. So I think full integration, I'm not sure that would work. There's enough about technology that is just a language of its own. In the same way that if I had to work all the time with a group of people in marketing, I wouldn't know what they were talking about half the time, right? They have their own language, they have their own acronyms, there's processes that are just intuitive to them, but wouldn't know what they were doing. And I think in technology, you know, it's probably even harder to understand. I think one of the issues for technology functions is that business users and business functions are far more tech savvy, right? Because everything that you use at home is sort of technology. It's moving that way. It's more accessible. And the danger for technology functions is that perceived knowledge from a business side is like, well, then why are you making it so hard?
We can do this ourselves.
You're making this really hard. But when you're looking at taking that sort of technology that you might use in your house and making it enterprise secure and enterprise scalable and resilient enough that it's not going to fall over, and intuitive enough that people are going to use it. Those things are hard things to do. They're expensive, they're time consuming, all of that stuff. Now, so I think you have far more technology aware stakeholders, but not necessarily aware of some of the limitations and constraints.
But you can still manage the shadow IT. It doesn't exist here, I imagine.
It's not terrible.
Okay.
It happens, but it's visible. Yeah. So we're not a big enough company that there's stuff hiding in corners. Yeah. But there is obviously, you know, areas where there's frustration, or a supplier will get to someone and say, oh, look at this, and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to buy that, that's going to be brilliant. So I think there is, you know, there's balancing that, but also I have a program manager working with each of the different business areas, and I obviously work with heads of department and executives in each of the business areas, and they're pretty transparent about what it is they're trying to do or doing, and so it's more often conversations about how do we most quickly satisfy this. There's also a lot of things that happen. At some point they have to hit the tech shop, right? They need to be integrated, or data needs to be provided, or they need to be backed up, or there's some hardware that's required, or the supplier needs something. And so it's quite hard when you have such a broad and integrated estate for someone to drop in a piece of tech and for it never to surface.
So how, in general, technology, how is that organized in Channel 4? Because I can imagine you have all the broadcasting technology, and you have the traditional IT part. How is that organized over here?
So I look after all the line of business applications, business change, and some of the support for the lines of business. And I work with a guy called Orpheus War. He's the CTO. He and I both report to the COO. He looks after tech strategy, architecture, infrastructure and service operations, and then the broadcast tech stack, because it's very specific. And he's been here for a number of years, and then I've been here for a short time. So actually, I think we complement each other quite well in operating the department that way. So I essentially look at change and projects and programs primarily, and then he looks after the run and then the change that's associated with broadcast. Although we've done some pretty big change in his side of the shop in the last 12 months, introducing 365 and Agile working, new laptops, infrastructure, and of course we're doing a relocation at the moment, so we're opening hubs in Glasgow and Bristol and a national HQ in Leeds, and they are all have to be built, networked, fit out, and again, they're big programs that sit in offside. The PMO, though, looks across the whole of the change portfolio. So from a reporting and a process perspective, that's centralized across the lot.
So Charlotte, in total, IT and technology is around 300 people, up and down, internal, external.
Yep.
How do you manage your teams? And how do you make sure that you attract the right people, retain them, and make them successful? What is your secret ingredient in this?
Oh my God, there's a question. So, so I have 7 direct reports, and I work very closely with them. They're all different, so I make sure I treat them differently. I think one of the dangers as a manager is that you have your way of managing your team, and then you manage them that way, and they have to adapt to your style. But actually, I don't think that you get the best out of people that way. So I very much adapt my style to work with each of them based on how they operate.
Okay.
They all manage big teams as well. Yep. So, well, big and small teams actually. So there's a degree to which I hope that then translates, and they then manage their teams that way. I'm not too hierarchical in terms of the way that I operate. I try and share as much information with my teams as possible. I think people don't do well in a vacuum. Organizations quite often hold back information and don't necessarily share as much as they can. They sort of share bits and pieces, but not as much as they can. I'm all for trying to keep the teams as informed as possible at all times of the context of the work that they're doing. Because I think if you don't have the context for the work that you're doing, it's very hard to be motivated. You don't know what you're contributing. You sort of get to the point where sort of, why am I coming to work every day? I'm just churning stuff out, but I don't really see how it fits. So I try and make sure I communicate as much as possible to my direct reports and sort of set an example to them in terms of how they might want to communicate with their teams.
So you're very much of the coaching type of manager, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they'd probably accuse me of being a dictator every now and then, but
that's another word for coaching, though.
Yeah, well, we'll have the conversations and, you know, we'll have a debate, and then in the end I'll be like, it's not a democracy though. We've got to get stuff done. But yeah, I would like to think I'm approachable and I make myself available. And the fact is I don't have a deep technology kit bag in terms of my background. And so I rely on them being the experts in their domains. Yeah. And I see my role as creating the environment where they can be successful. And to do that, they need to feel that they can share with me what they need to, whether it's frustration at me or at something else, whether it's anxiety about something that's keeping them awake at night, whether it's needing a pat on the back for having achieved all of those things. And if I can keep them motivated and I can keep them feeling like they have my support and they have someone who can provide them with some direction or some thought-provoking views when they're wrestling with one of their problems, that's my role. A lot of them have quite deep technical knowledge of the verticals and their applications. So to try and impose might be pointless, right?
Let's talk a bit about your background, because I thought that was really, really interesting. I mean, you studied environmental science, archaeology, applied marine science. How the hell do you end up in IT if you have that background? And so what was the process there?
Well, so I was a bit of a disaster at school. I only got D's in my A levels. I didn't do well learning in that environment. And I tried being a waitress for a year, but I figured I wasn't going to make my mark that way. So I went to university and I did a year as a teacher trainer. Teaching was going to be a biology teacher, but I did my teacher training in a school for like 6 weeks and thought, this is really hard work. I don't want to do this, and I don't really get this whole children thing at that stage. So then I moved to because I was at university, I could see what degree courses were available, and I was interested in environmental science. And so I chose that as my major. And then there was archaeology as a potential. It was a modular degree and I had to pick another subject, so I picked archaeology, and it was fascinating. So I did my degree in environmental science and archaeology and thought I was going to maybe go off and save the world
and dig up dirt and
all of that stuff. But I was particularly interested in marine science, and so I went and did an applied marine science degree. And it was quite interesting because I didn't do well at all at my GCSE chemistry, and then in my master's degree I had to do advanced marine chemistry and I passed. So I think it was definitely important to me to understand that something that I thought I couldn't do and was an abject failure at, when it was applied in the context of something I wanted to do, that then became something I could learn.
So motivation is everything.
Yeah, I think so. You can do anything if it's going to get you to something that you want to get to. So I came out of my master's degree and I kind of fancied myself as a bit of a Jacques Cousteau, but he had Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah,
yes,
but he had family money, right? He had family money. I didn't know that. I thought that was a real job, and I got a job at IBM as a temp, as a projects assistant, because I needed some money to pay off my student loans, and I just had some really good people that I worked for at IBM, and IBM's an interesting company. It's huge breadth of different business areas and technologies, and so I worked in the travel and transport solutions unit. So it was airlines, and we were doing biometrics for immigration. So it was quite interesting, new technology at the time, in quite an interesting industry, and it's not dissimilar to science technology, right? You've got hypotheses you need to test, and you've got problems you need to solve, and I guess I just found. In that role, I was really good at just getting things done. and working with lots of people. So I had a job in my first 2 years at IBM where I was facilitating a pilot for an automated immigration system in Bermuda. That was where the pilot was, and we arrived, the guy from the US, the sales guy, and myself and the project manager from the UK in Bermuda to do this big launch, and nothing was ready. And then the guy, I said to the global solutions guy, I can fix this by Friday, just let me get on and organize. And I organized everything, and I said, right, well, for the next 18 months you need to be here 1 week out of every 2 in order to sort of liaise between the Bermuda Immigration Authority and the government and the tech team in the UK and the sales team in the US.
Pretty cool then.
And it was a cool job, and that's when I kind of realized maybe my job is getting on with people and organizing things and controlling the activities and making sure that everything's sort of moving. And being willing to take a lead, I suppose, and put yourself out there as the person who's going to be responsible for getting it. That's, I think, what I bring to the table.
So what is your secret in getting things done then? What are your principles to make sure that things...
I don't like failure.
Failure is not enough.
No, I had 2 brothers. I'm quite competitive, so I think there is a degree of, as soon as someone says, "Oh no, that can't be done," that's like an invitation.
Okay.
It's like, oh, that can't possibly be done. It's like, right, let's have a look at what can't be done. That sounds like something that's quite interesting. So there's definitely something inherent about me that is, I like to be able to prove that you can, that things that people say can't be done can.
And then technology is a great environment.
Right, it definitely is. I think the other thing is that, no one likes to fail, right? Everybody wants to succeed, but you've got to be brave enough to be prepared to fail in order to really sort of get things done. And I've learned over time to cope with failure.
So what was your most brilliant failure that you ever did then?
My most brilliant failure.
And what did you learn from it, of course? That's what it is.
Well, I'll be non-specific because I wouldn't want to attribute it to a particular organisation, but in a reasonably senior leadership position, I had to basically pick up a portfolio and look at a project that had been going wrong for some time.
Yeah.
And be very clear with the board, and this was fairly early in my tenure at the company, that the program was not going to be successful. It wasn't my first role at the company; it was in my second role at the company. But it was. So I'd seen it going wrong from another area, and then I then took on responsibility for that area, and it was definitely going wrong. And so the sleepless nights in terms of gradually acquiring the information that was informing me that this thing wasn't going to be a success and actually was going to result in a substantial write-off. That was tough. That was tough but it wasn't my.
It was not your failure.
It wasn't my failure, but that was one of the hardest lessons in. You're still the person who's going to have to front up and tell the story. I think in terms of. Gosh, I'm trying to think. There's a number, right? There's a number. You have projects where they haven't delivered, and you have to go back and look at every action that you took and every decision that you made, and ask yourself, was I listening enough? And often that's the problem. There are voices that are telling you, but they're perhaps not loud enough. Or was I not paying enough attention? Did I not scrutinise the information? I mean, we were talking briefly earlier about the having to operate without having all the detail.
Yeah.
As you start having to operate in a leadership position and you have a breadth of responsibility that means you can't be over everything.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that's interesting. In your career you've taken on more and more responsibility. And we'll talk about your personality in a moment, but you tend to like having control and knowing all the details and so on. But if you take more and more responsibility, more and more bigger teams, you can't always have all the details. So how do you manage that? As a person who likes to, by default, control all the details, let go of that, and manage teams in annual projects?
I think you have to learn it. And you can only learn it by doing it. So when I was at Specsavers, I was head of business systems for retail. I was delivering a big retail program, and then I got promoted to the supply chain IT director role. And I remember 3 months in, I spoke to the IT director of retail, who'd previously been my boss, and I was like, Carl, seriously, it's so lonely. You didn't tell me. It's going to get better, right? And he said, no, you'll just get used to it. And and he was right. But you get to the point where, for me, I tried, right? So at first I tried. I'd be up all night reading all the emails, scrutinizing all the project reports, looking at all the figures, and then trying to process that. And I'd have lists and notes to try and organize my thoughts so that if I was in a meeting, I'd have a frame of reference for the things I might be asked or I'd need to know. And within 3 months, it's just not sustainable.
Yeah,
it's not sustainable.
Impossible to keep up.
So, but in those 3 months, I went to enough board meetings that I'd hear the questions and I'd start to understand what's the information I really need to know. And I think the interesting thing as you get further and further up an organization and you're sitting in forums, you start to realize that all of the people sitting around the table are having to take decisions and make decisions based on a level of information that is way less than you thought.
Yeah.
So when you're further down an organization and you're looking at them, you're thinking, God, these people, they must know everything, right? They must be so smart. They know everything. They've got all the facts. You know, I'm never going to be smart enough to do that. And then you sit and you realize that actually, no, these people have just got comfortable leading and managing and making decisions with less information than they might like to have, but they've identified what are the critical pieces of information that they need.
And what are these? What is it that you need to know to make a decision without knowing all the details?
In my role, I need to, a lot of it's about delivery, a lot of the questions about when, how much, how likely is this to fail? If it fails, what are the contingency plans? What are the biggest risks? And I think, and there's a threshold then for the types of programs that you need to know that. So anything under 100K, my program managers can keep an eye on that, right? Anything under 500,000 to 1 million, I want to know when it's going to deliver. If that's going to change, I need to know that. And I kind of have to get a gut sense of how likely is that. I need to know how much is it going to cost broadly. I need to sort of, so anything over 1 million upwards, you probably need to at least on a weekly basis be reading the project report and looking for any smoking red flags. And it's experience over time that allows you to sort of read between the lines of all of the words, because of course your program managers put all of the words in and you have to sort of pick out where are those red flags. And only experience really gets you to that.
But I can imagine it has a lot to do with working with teams and with people and knowing when to trust them and when not to trust them, and so how did you experience that? How did you grow up in that?
I think you have to put the people around you. Well, you don't actually, that's not true. You don't always have the luxury of having all the people around you that you might choose. Right? So you really have to get to know your team and understand their strengths and weaknesses. So if I look at my team, they all have they're very different people, right? They have very different strengths and weaknesses. So there may be one where if he tells me the dates, I know his planning is on point all the time. And so I'll be really confident in what he might tell me. And I might have another employee or direct report who give me a plan, and I know their planning isn't necessarily, so I might ask a few more questions.
And you put in some contingency.
I might be a little bit less bold about how I position those dates. So I think it's definitely about understanding what you're getting from people, but then also understanding who you're presenting to and what they need to know. So you always assume that they want to know more than they actually do until you get to a certain point where you realize, no, what they really want is the reassurance that you're over your patch. But what the majority of boards and executives are looking for are for you to tell them if there's anything they need to be worrying about, and they need to they need to be able to trust that. And so there's building that relationship where they're looking to you and you're sharing the information and they feel confident you're sharing what they need to know to be able to make their decisions, which are again at a different level.
Okay, interesting to see how you evolve as a leader, right? And how you go from needing to know all the details into trusting people and knowing which critical questions to ask, and depending on the level of project, what to follow up and or not. Very
well. For me as well, I love the scale and complexity part. So the thing that offsets, I can either. And for my master's degree, I wrote a paper about it was an ecotoxicology about a very specific impact of a single chemical on a population of a particular kind of mollusk, right? Very specific, and I can get very immersed in that type of detailed study But then I can also get excited about having multiple different things all happening concurrently that give you that sort of breadth of interest. And I don't think there's much in my job now that allows me to be in that sort of mode of really scrutinizing a single kind of topic or area. So I've lent towards in my career, certainly, that other part of my preference, if you like, which is to have that breadth of scale and complexity that means there's lots of different interests. So my day when I'm at home, if I work from home, I will try and do two things so that I can get total immersion in two important things, what I call hard thinking work. So I'll do 2 pieces of hard thinking work if I can. When I'm in the office, I'll be in like 8 different meetings and they'll be on different topics all the way through the day. And
so you work at home for your hard thinking work.
Yeah.
Give me an example. What is that?
So recently I've had a program that's not going brilliantly and I needed to go back and scrutinize a load of reports and look at all the various emails and the communication. It's hard thinking work. Or when we're evaluating different proposals and you need to really read through the RFPs and get into the responses and get into the detail of understanding, hard thinking work. If you're distracted, you can lose half an hour getting back into it. It's that sort of work.
And for that, you need to be on your own.
Yeah, we have an open plan office. Even if I'm eating at my desk, people are like, she's at her desk, I've got a question, I'm going to pop over. Okay. So if I want to be uninterrupted and I want to focus and be as productive as I can be, I don't necessarily have to be at home, it could be anywhere as long as I'm not sat at my desk.
Okay.
But when I'm in the office, because there are people around and it's distracting, I don't do great hard thinking work in the office, but I engage with my team and then I have lots of different topic meetings.
So you like to work with people?
Yeah.
You like to get things done? You like to be challenged by complexity?
Yep.
You take time alone to do the hard thinking work. Picture is getting clearer and clearer. Let's talk about your personality. In these conversations we use as a common thread the MBTI profile.
Yes.
And you shared us that your profile is INFJ.
Right.
And then INFJ, I'm going to read the summary of this. Personality type is very rare. And they make up less than 1% of the population. But nonetheless, they leave their mark on the world. Advocates, as they are called, they have an inborn sense of idealism and morality, and what sets them apart is that they are not idle dreamers. These individuals are capable of taking concrete steps to realize their goals and making a lasting positive impact. How does that resonate?
Which sounds okay. It does resonate with me. I definitely have I have a strong sense of what's right and wrong in my mind, and of fairness. I remember saying numerous times when I was growing up to my mum, it's not fair, with my brothers, and she would say, well, the world's not meant to be fair. I think it plays into, I definitely like to have a goal and I set myself goals and then work towards them in a sort of fairly rational way. I was interested that I was pretty sure I would come out as an introvert. I was interested that I did, because often people think I'm an extrovert, but actually I need the time alone, and I need the time by myself to really reflect on things. And also if I've had a busy day, you know, some people thrive from then having the energy of being around other people, and I just need...
You don't go to the pub at the end of a hard working day? No.
Only if there's like team drinks, and and then, you know, it's important to be there.
But you need enough time on yourself to...
Yeah, traveling for business is you know, you meetings, dinners, lunches, meetings. I'm like back to the hotel for you know, some TV and a burger on a tray.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think I'm too much of an idealist, because I would have described myself as a pragmatist in terms of being able to get things done. I was reading a book recently by Shackleton about his what do you call it, expedition, and where it all went so horribly wrong. And one of the quotes... And
Shackleton was? I don't know.
Ernest Shackleton, the explorer, who he went on the Endurance and got trapped and then had to go overland to save himself and his crew and all this stuff. He said, no great things are achieved by being realistic. And that's quite interesting for me, because I think it's true. You know, you're never going to achieve anything truly great if you focus on what's realistic. But equally, I have to deliver loads of projects, and I like my team to be realistic about what can be achieved. So it's an interesting thing for me, that's like this ambition that says I want to achieve great things, but also I'm a pragmatist who immediately looks at, okay, how can that be done in a realistic way?
Okay, some of the strengths, and then you pick out the word that fit you best. Strengths of INFJs is creative, insightful, inspiring, convincing, decisive, determined, passionate, and altruistic. So which ones pop out mostly?
Determined.
Determined.
I think you have to take responsibility for your life and your work and what you want to achieve, and then you have to be determined enough that you're going to get there, because nothing comes for free. I'd like to think inspiring. I think I've been effective in managing my teams and leading in a way which inspires people to follow and work with. So I think they probably pop out the most.
The areas of attention,
growth potential,
areas are with people with this personality type is they can be very sensitive, sometimes extremely private, perfectionist. They always need to have a cause, and they sometimes can burn out easily. What are the challenges that you pay attention most to?
So I've had to learn to get a thick skin. I would definitely say I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive to criticism, and I'm sensitive to failure, and I'm sensitive. So I've had to develop a sort of, a thick skin in order to feel.
So failure hurts for you?
Yeah, probably more than for most. Yeah. And I don't think it's because I'm a perfectionist. I think it's because I'm competitive and I like to win, and I like to deliver what I say I'm going to deliver. So if I see that going wrong, I ask myself some pretty searching questions. So I would say sensitive. What else was on that list?
Extremely private. Always needs to have a cause. Can burn out easily. Not too much.
Not so much. I mean, I am quite private. I don't like to mix my sort of personal and professional. I find, work functions bring your spouse not so easy. I just think there's, you have a mode that you operate in at work, and then at home I'm a wife and a mother, and I'm, in fact I'm Charlotte Light at work. That's my maiden name. My married name is Charlotte Perryman, so I almost have these two.
So you have two two sets of clothes.
Different. Well, it's a different life, isn't it? It's a different life being a wife and mother to being a CIO.
So you have a son of 10, you told me, and a husband.
Yes.
So what are the values that you want to give your son? When will you be content when you see your son grow up?
I want him to be happy, obviously. And I want him to know that to be happy he's probably going to have to work hard.
Okay.
So, people sort of say you need to find the thing that you love and then you won't work a day in your life. I think that's true for the lucky people who find the thing they absolutely love doing and manage to convert it into an income that supports the lifestyle they want to have. I think for everyone else, it's a case of figuring out what can you work hard at, that you're good at, that's going to, pay the mortgage and allow you to sort of feel like you're contributing and feel like you're achieving and feel that you're fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I think for him, obviously I want happiness. But I think that comes in lots of different forms, and part of that is through figuring out, what it is to work hard and achieve and feel that satisfaction that comes with achieving great things, and that great things can be quite small things. I think sometimes there's this sort of misconception that to achieve something great, you have to be like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or...
But he does pretty fancy things, no?
They do pretty fancy things, but there are great things you can do on quite a small scale every
But then
day.
Steve Jobs wasn't happy on his deathbed, and he said,
there you go.
I could have done many more beautiful things than just build a big money-making machine as a company.
So I think that's it's understanding that to be great and to have that sense of fulfillment of contributing can come in lots of different forms.
So family is important for you then?
Yeah, very important.
Yeah. Okay. Personal mantra. Do you have any, and how do you live by them?
I have a number of things that would fall into a sort of mantra category. I guess I have a thing about, and this is just reflecting that everything that you learn that's really important, you learn when you fail. There are very few things that you learn from the things that are just successful or that come easily. I'm also quite particular about making sure people are treated. I will never speak to someone in a way that I would feel uncomfortable if someone spoke to me that way. So there's a sort of degree about how you communicate with people. And then the third is I spent quite a lot of my early career being quite scared of a lot of things. And then I wouldn't put myself out there necessarily. And I think you reach a tipping point where you have to decide to sort of feel the fear and do it anyway. There's that sort of, if you're afraid, you just need to go for it.
And what was your tipping point?
I was taking the director job. That was, career-wise, that was a definite tipping point. Because up until that point, there'd always been someone else who was ultimately on the hook. And therefore, the failures would not necessarily, I wouldn't have to be the face of this project failing or going over budget or not achieving something. I'd be contributing to it maybe, but it wouldn't necessarily be mine to own. And I think that, once you get to a certain threshold of leadership, you have to own. You're responsible. You're
and that was very frightening and scary in the beginning.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
But now it's fulfilling.
Yeah, now it's become the thing that I find motivating, and that doesn't mean I don't still have periods where everything doesn't seem to be going brilliantly, and I know I'm going to have to deal with some difficult conversations and some fallout from that, and that's hard. It's because of my sort of high sensitivity to criticism or failure. I'd be there thinking, oh God, I'm going to have to deal with this, but that's part of my job, right? That's part of my job is to own the outcomes, and that means when there are good outcomes, I get to own those, and I get to share that with my team.
And then
when there are bad outcomes, then I try and shoulder those and not share that so much with my team because you want your team to be motivated. And typically when things go wrong, they don't go wrong because of any single individual or any single action. It's some cumulative set of parameters that just mean you haven't completely crafted the environment for success.
So your professional happiness is when you can have success and deliver together with the team. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think so. Well, there's not much fun celebrating by yourself, is there? Look, we achieved this great result. I'm going to go and celebrate alone.
Yeah, have a hamburger.
Exactly.
Okay. You are active in the advisory board of the Institute of Coding.
Yes.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so the Institute of Coding is it's an initiative that's funded by the government to look at how tertiary education in the UK can be better adapted to deliver digital skills into industry. And it's constructed in such a way that there's a board that are looking at how to spend the money on developing courses and content and tertiary education that's going to fulfill that brief. But there's also then an industry advisory board made up of a number of people who work in industry, so people from Google and Amazon, from BP, a range of different companies, myself included, who are there to provide the industry perspective in terms of what we're looking for. And one of the, we sort of review the programs that are being put in place to address the skills gap. But one of the interesting things that comes out of those sessions is the dialogue around what is it that industry is looking for. And one of the consistent themes, which is really interesting to me, because the conversation started off as like, do we need to do more big data training? Or do we need to have a security degree? Or do we need to do specific types of tech degree courses? And one of the consistent messages from industry is that what they're looking for are people with the softer skills around working practice. So it's not so much around have you got a big data degree, it's about do you know how to show up to work on time every day and act like a good corporate citizen in the office. You know, so it was more around that is, from an industry perspective, one of the big skills gaps that can be missing from people who are coming out of university. There is also a lot of discussion around, you know, a 3-year degree in a topic in tech. You're going to be obsolete. Your year one is likely to be obsolete by year 3 and by the time you sort of get into industry. So there's some discussion about how do you do more around combined courses where you have classroom-based education, but then you have more substantial placements. And my degree was obviously a long time ago, but typically there'd be a sort of 6-month industrial placement in year 3 prior to you completing your degree. And I think now what's being advocated by the Industry Advisory Board is more, well, why wouldn't you have some more frequent interaction between individuals and industry? And I mean, it's an interesting challenge because, you know, I think I'm as likely to hire someone as a developer straight from school if they've got the necessary skills and attributes to be a great developer than from university, because if someone's already decided they want to develop code, the best place for them to learn how to do that is by sitting in a project team, working in a company, and doing various skill courses that are provided by industry rather than necessarily having a degree. And I think that's going to shift, you know, the dial in terms of putting people earlier into work, but allowing them to learn on the job. So I think it's an interesting forum to sit on because there's supplier side and client side companies who are offering opinions, but actually the opinions are very much sort of aligned in terms of what companies are struggling to find from graduates.
So how easy is it for you to attract top talent here in Channel 4?
We're lucky, right? We have a great profile, we're an amazing brand, and we're a TV company. So I think we can attract a lot of people. What that then presents is a different challenge to most companies of working through and identifying who are the people with the right skills and who will have the best fit.
And what are the specific profiles that are more difficult to find? Or
engineers, always difficult. Well, broadcast engineers. I mean, it's on off side of the shop, but I know it's a specific skill, and it's certainly a difficult skill to find any diverse candidates.
Satellite engineers.
Female satellite engineers. That would be someone to find.
Okay.
Architects also can be quite challenging. There are certain skills that are hard to find in the market generally.
That's interesting. I mean, with a good brand, it's easier, and with a funky environment, it's easier to attract good people. So that's
and
cool.
we don't have much of an issue around retention. So people who come here tend to stay here. And if anything, one of the challenges we have is that because it's a great place to work and people love working here, offering that progression, especially as people progress to more senior levels, there aren't the roles to move them to. So you have to look at different ways to motivate and develop staff.
So I can imagine that you, for some of the people in your team, are a mentor, and you coach them and to become better professionals. When you look back in your own career, who were important mentors for you, and what did you learn from them?
So I worked at Specsavers and previously at Bupa for a guy called John Lister. He was the CIO at both of those organisations when I worked there. And he was a big advocate to me. We're having lunch on Wednesday, actually, and he still is. He's a very down-to-earth guy, but he's always provided me with sort of fairly sage counsel, good feedback, and offered me opportunities, I think, on the basis of the work that we've done together. So he's definitely someone who earlier in my career was sort of inspiring as someone to aspire to be and to look at and say, well, what would it take for me to be doing his job?
And what did you specifically learn from him?
I think a number of things. That the piece about figuring out what are the right things to focus on and allowing that to be enough. Certainly about taking decisions in a timely way, even when you feel perhaps that you don't know enough, because you get to the point of understanding that any decision is better than no decision. Definitely about being sort of determined and taking the rough with the smooth. I mean, I watched him take some fairly big hits when he was a CIO in terms of things that weren't going brilliantly, and just observing how he handled those situations in a sort of calm and measured and professional way. You know, he's had a number of sort of personal challenges to overcome that make him particularly inspiring as an individual. Yeah, so just in terms of someone who seems to manage to remain calm and good-humoured even in the face of having difficult conversations.
Okay.
From that level, just down to small things like I presented to the board fairly early on in my tenure working at Bupa, and it was my first board presentation. I was very nervous, and when I came out, he said, "Your content was brilliant, but you said at the end of too many sentences. You should just observe that." And it's just those little things of having someone tell you the things that you wouldn't notice yourself to prevent you doing it over and over again and allowing you to sort of be a bit more credible in what you're doing.
In preparing this conversation, you told me that you've been lucky in your life.
Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
I think I have a loving, stable family. So my parents are together and healthy. I have brothers and they have wives and children who are happy and healthy. I've had a good career so far. You know, I'm in my mid to late 40s, and I've been able to progress through a number of organizations and have different roles open up to me that have given me the opportunity to grow. I have a good marriage and a beautiful child and a good life at a time when, you know, you look around the world and what's happening, and there are lots of people far less fortunate.
Yep.
So I feel like I can't be unhappy with the lot that I have and the cards that I've been dealt, and I think that's a fortunate position to be in.
These conversations are being watched by current CIOs, but also future CIOs and digital leaders. With your background and experience, what would your advice be to younger people that say, well, I want to be the CIO of Channel 4, BBC, or another media company or a high-profile company later? What would your advice be to them?
Right. I mean, I think you have to have a plan, a little bit. That you don't need to know exactly how the plan's going to work, but you need to have a plan that sort of sets yourself some targets of where do I want to be when I'm 35? Where do I want to be by 40? Sort of I had 5-year milestones. I wanted to be an IT director by the time I was 40, and I wanted to be a CIO by the time I was 45. And I think just setting some parameters and then thinking about what would need to be true for me to achieve that. Well, I'd need the right sponsorship. I need to have done the right sort of roles. It's not necessarily about training, it's about experience. I would definitely, there were chances that had I known what I know now, I would have taken sooner. So I think, you know, the thing we talked about where you have this assumption that people who are in senior positions they're there because they know everything. Yeah, that's not true. You know, they're there because they know enough, and they have enough experience to draw on that they can confidently make decisions. That's what it boils down to. You have to. There are some people who are fortunate to gain enough experience in a short amount of time that they can make those leaps sooner, but there's definitely no substitute for having
the ambition and the plan.
Yeah, ambition and a plan, and then learning.
So what's the plan for the next 5 years then?
I still have a number of things that I would like to achieve while I'm here, and there's sufficient change and disruption in the industry that actually media is quite a fun place to be right now. So I think that presents me a longer time horizon here than you might have otherwise. I used to think as well that an industry shift, and it used to be true actually in tech, that you'd need to shift industries in order to sort of shake things up a bit. So the way technical delivery worked, the way the lack of breadth of options in technology meant that if you went from one company to another in the same industry, you'd basically be dealing with the same things.
Yeah, if you go from a bank to a bank to a bank. It's
and so I deliberately moved to different industries in my career in order to take what I'd learnt and then apply it in a new industry context and learn new information. Yeah. I think the thing that's different now is that the spectrum of technology that's available to any given company and the volume of industry-specific technology is such that actually that's harder to do now, right? It's taken me a good 12 to 18 months to get genned up on the technology that's specific to media, and I would say I'm still learning every day. Yeah. I mean, 18 months at a previous company, I'd have been all over it. And it's because the complexity is higher, the degree to which technology influences the way the business operates has expanded, the demand for technology within the business and across the industry is expanding, and the options are proliferating like wildfire. So there is a degree to which my mode of working may need to, I may need to take a view on, do I stay in or proximal to this industry? And do I stay here and see out the sort of disruption that's going to come from the...
Do you see yourself functioning in an IT function or in an IT role, or not in a more in a
I love
role?
It. Yeah. I'm not a technologist, but I love working in technology and I'm good at it. And I think if you find something that you enjoy and that you're good at, why...
If you enjoy it, you're good at it and it pays, then that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and it pays. There you go, yeah. So I think the problem still exists and is exacerbated by the pace of change, that the majority of companies that have any kind of tenure or history have a big legacy estate, custom applications, big ERP systems, on-premise, chunks of old infrastructure. And the appetite for change coming from the business is so big and can be met using services, cloud services, small applications, niche solutions, can be integrated in an easier way at the front end, but then you still have this great big chunk of big applications, databases and machines at the back end. And the budget required for those is almost higher than the budget for the stuff at the front end. So trying to convince chief executives and executive committees to spend sufficiently on either managing and maintaining that legacy estate as you gradually move the function onto new technology, or actively investing in shifting that dial, or recognizing you have to mothball something and just hope it never falls over. Those conversations are difficult. They're getting harder and harder to have because that appetite for change at the front end is so aggressive, and the competitive demands certainly in our industry make that even more pressing.
So there's a big IT debt.
There's a huge
there
is a huge IT debt, and typically it costs more and takes longer to deal with the boring stuff at the back than the exciting stuff at the front.
And what's the magic solution to fix this?
I think in every year you have to plan. You have to plan to gradually decommission and migrate. You also have to look at some things and say, you know what, that's part of our estate that we're going to have to look after. We're going to have to manage it and maintain it. I know a lot of banks have done that with a lot of their really old complex systems. They look at how to just manage and maintain that while gradually moving the functions out of the box and into other ways. But it is about making sure that you can articulate clearly the benefit of doing that, because it's always easy to spin the benefits case around the whizzy stuff that you want to do that's new, but spinning up a proper benefits case for what you need to invest in your legacy estate, I think that's one of the things that it's a core part of the job, right?
But not the most fun part.
It's not the most fun part. There's very little glory there. But you know, it's important to keep everything safe.
No, absolutely. So, Charlotte, thank you very much for this conversation. I thought that was really, really interesting. So thank you for sharing your insights, your views, and talking about yourself and your team here. So
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.